This is the defining moment of the Ukraine war. The moment when everything turns around for Ukraine, as it has survived Russia's attempts at attrition and can now focus on destroying Putin's troops. 60 billion euros has arrived to arm Ukraine, courtesy of Europe. That's enough to send Russia back to the Stone Age, as what Europe just did has screwed Russia twice. Let's start with the headlines. The European Union, or EU, has officially approved a 90 billion euros, or around $107 billion, loan package to Ukraine. The vote on the loan passed on February 11th, and it's set to screw Russia in two different ways. First, Ukraine is getting a much-needed cash injection at a time when it really needs one. With its economy struggling, Ukraine now has the money it needs to fight the war for at least another year, putting immense pressure on Putin. And second, Russia will be paying for this loan. We'll explain how later in the video. But the key point to know is that this loan is structured in a way that Ukraine only has to repay the principal. That principal is only going to be repaid once the Ukraine war ends, and the repayments are to be made using war reparations that Ukraine receives from Russia. The EU has plunged the dagger and turned it twice. Let's dig into how. Starting with what's coming to Ukraine. The loan package is being funded via joint EU debt issuance and is designed specifically to provide both defense procurement and budget-related support as Russia's invasion is ongoing. The loan also has a 60-30th split. 60 billion euros is to be used by Ukraine on military assistance, which includes weapons procurement from selected nations. According to UA Wire, these weapons purchases must take place in a limited number of states, which include Ukraine, the EU member nations, and countries that are in the European Free Trade Association and European Economic Area. These latter groups open up the possibility for Ukraine to purchase arms from some non-EU members, including Switzerland, Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein. But there's more. If there is a weapon system that Ukraine needs that either can't be supplied by any nations that fall within this approved list, or can't be delivered in a timely manner, Ukraine has the ability to purchase those weapons from third countries, using the 60 billion euros portion of the EU loan. That likely opens up purchases from the likes of the UK and the US, for instance. If France can't provide SCALP missiles to Ukraine, it appears that Ukraine would be able to seek its UK equivalent, the Storm Shadow, from the UK similarly. We can assume that Ukraine would be able to purchase Patriot systems and missiles from the US if they can't be provided by nations in the Eurozone. As for the 30 billion euros, that is to be used to financially support Ukraine as it confronts the budget crisis that has been caused by Putin's brutal invasion. We'll dig more into that issue later in the video. But what this basically means is that Ukraine has some much-needed breathing room in its budget, as Russia attempts to bankrupt the country. Putin needed Ukraine to run out of money. It has taken 4 years for Russia to capture 20% of Ukraine, and that percentage includes the Crimean Peninsula that Russia illegally annexed in 2014 and parts of the Donbas region that Russia occupied in the same year. Putin knows that it would take years, perhaps even decades, for Russia to defeat Ukraine on the battlefield. Russia has only gained 1.5% of Ukraine since early 2024. Now, Ukraine has yet more financial support that will keep it in the fight longer than Putin ever believed it would be. There are also some technical details surrounding the loan that need to be considered. According to the European Parliament website, the 90 billion euros loan passed with strong approval, garnering 458 votes for versus 140 against, along with 44 abstentions. The Parliament also had to pass amendments to both the Ukraine facility, which is designed to support Ukraine, and the 2021 to 2027 EU long-term budget to make the loan viable. Both passed, with the Ukraine facility amendments receiving 473 votes for, and the budget amendment receiving 490 votes. Due to these amendments, the European Commission has estimated that the EU will have to pay an additional 1 billion euros in 2027 to service the new debt, with that number rising to 3 billion euros per year thereafter. As for when the money will arrive in Ukraine, there's one more hurdle to overcome. The European Council must formally adopt the new loan package, which seems like a given. The Council chief, Antonio Costa, has played a large part in getting this loan over the line. So it seems very unlikely that the Council that he now leads is going to say no after the loan has received such overwhelming support in the European Parliament. Once the formal approval is granted, it won't take long for the money to start moving into Ukraine. The initial tranche could arrive as early as the second quarter of 2026, and that will kill Putin. He knows that. Russia is screwed because the only real way that he had out of the war that he started was to force Ukraine into bankruptcy. Russia's military certainly isn't making the gains that it needs to make to win otherwise, as we noted before.
It has survived Russia's attempts at attrition
another
and can
year
now
or two of
focus on
sending
destroying
soldiers
Putin's
into a meat
troops.
grinder that has
60
already
billion euro has
cost
arrived
Russia
to arm
over
Ukraine, courtesy of
1.25
Europe.
million soldiers
That's enough
and
to
tens
send
of
Russia
thousands
back
of
to the
units of
Stone Age.
military equipment.
What Europe just
Putin
did has
thought he
screwed
could
Russia
attrit Ukraine.
twice.
Now the
Let's
opposite
start
is
with the
happening.
headlines.
It's
The
Russia
European
that is
Union,
clawing
or
to
EU,
survive,
has officially
and the
approved
EU
a 90
loan
billion
is a huge
euros,
part of the
or around
reason why.
$107 billion
This alone
loan
changes
package
everything
to
for
Ukraine.
Ukraine.
The vote on the loan
And by the
passed
way,
on February
you're watching
11th,
the military
and it's
show.
set to screw
If you
Russia
haven't
in two
subscribed
different
yet,
ways.
now is the perfect
First,
time.
Ukraine is getting a
Putin will
much-needed
obviously
cash
feel like
injection
he
at
has
a
been
time when
screwed
it really
hard by
needs
what
one.
the EU
With
just
its
did for
economy
Ukraine.
struggling, Ukraine
But
now has
earlier
the
in the
money it
video,
needs to
we
fight the
told you
war
that
for at
this was
least
a
another
double
year.
screw that was
This
going to
puts
hit
immense
Russia
pressure
hard.
on Putin.
The second
And
turn of
second,
the screw comes
Russia
from the
will be
fact
paying
that
for this
Ukraine
loan.
looks set to
This loan is
basically not
structured
have
in a
to
way that
repay a penny
Ukraine
of this
only has
loan,
to repay the principal.
as all
That
repayments will
principal
be
is
made
only
from
going to be
Russian
repaid once the
reparations
Ukraine
made to
war ends,
Ukraine in the
and the
aftermath of
repayments
the
are to be
invasion
made
that
using
Putin
war
started.
reparations.
In other words, that
Ukraine
puts
receives
Russia
from
on the
Russia.
hook for repaying
The
this
EU has
loan.
plunged the dagger and
not
turned
Ukraine.
it twice.
The
Let's
basics
dig
are
into
outlined
how.
by the German
Starting with
Marshall
what's
Fund
coming
of
to
the
Ukraine,
United States,
the loan
or
package is being funded via
GMFUS,
joint
according to
EU
the
debt
group.
issuance.
This loan
It
is designed to be
specifically
entirely
provide
debt
both
neutral
defense
for
procurement
Ukraine.
and budget-related
In
support.
addition to the condition that
loan also
repayments
has
are
a
made via
60-30
Russian
split.
war reparations,
60 billion euros
this
is to
also
be used
means
by
that there
Ukraine
is
on military
0%
assistance,
interest applied
which
to the
includes
loan.
weapons procurement from
The
selected
EU
nations.
won't be making money
This
from
opens up the
Ukraine or
possibility for
Russia for
Ukraine to
providing this
purchase
cash
arms
injection.
from members
The
including
GMFUS
Switzerland,
also notes
Iceland,
that the EU
Norway,
has
and
reserved the
Liechtenstein.
right to use the
If a
Russian
weapon
assets
system can't
that
be
are frozen
supplied by
in
these
EU
nations
countries to repay
or
the
delivered
loan,
timely,
if needed.
Ukraine can purchase from
Right
third
now,
countries
Russia
like the
has
UK
around
and the US.
210 billion
For
euros,
instance, if
or
France
about
can't provide Scalp
$245
missiles,
billion,
Ukraine could seek the
frozen
Storm
in
Shadow
EU
from the
banks
UK.
and financial
Similarly,
vehicles.
Ukraine
It
could
seems that
purchase
the likely
Patriot
goal of
systems
this
from the
loan
US.
is to have it
As for
repaid
the 30
using those
billion
frozen
euros
assets
that is to be
once the
used
war
to
is over.
financially support
The
Ukraine as it
condition that
confronts
the
the budget
EU
crisis
can use them to make
caused by
repayments if
Putin's
Putin
brutal
continues
invasion.
his devastating
Putin needed
invasion
Ukraine to
is
run
something
out of
of a
money.
fail-safe
It has
that
taken
delivers
4
a
years
clear
for Russia to capture
message to
20%
Russia's
of
president,
Ukraine.
one way or another.
Putin knows that it would take
Russia
years,
is paying for
perhaps
Putin's
even
war.
decades, for Russia to
can't
defeat
even
Ukraine
hope that
on the
the loan is
battlefield.
going to collapse.
Russia has only gained
The EU
1.5%
isn't going to
of
be using
Ukraine
the
since
frozen
early
assets
2024.
directly to provide
Now,
the money to
Ukraine has yet more
Doing
financial
that
support
would have been a legal
that will keep it
nightmare
in the
that
fight
opened the
longer
door
than
for
Putin
Russia
ever
to
believed
contest
it
the
would be,
loan in international
according
courts.
to the European Parliament
Rather,
website.
as
The
the
90
Brussels
billion euro
Times
loan
reports,
passed with
the financing
458
for the
votes for
loan will be
versus
raised by
140
the EU
against.
borrowing
The
on
Parliament
capital
also
markets
passed
and,
amendments
as
to
mentioned
both the
earlier,
Ukraine
it's being
facility
backed
and
by
the
the
EU
EU
long-term
budget.
budget.
Right
The
now,
European
that
Council
budget
must
stands
formally
at
adopt
€2
the new
trillion,
loan package, which
or
seems like a given.
$2.38
Council
trillion
Chief Antonio Costa
for the
has played
period
a
of
large part in
2021
getting
to
this loan over the
2027.
line. Once
And
the
that has
formal
been
approval is
bolstered
granted,
by the
the
€800
initial
billion
tranche could arrive as
or
early as the
$950
second quarter
billion
of 2026.
next
This will
generation
kill
EU
Putin.
recovery
He
instrument that
knows
runs
Russia is
until
screwed because his
2026
only way out was
after
to force
throwing around
Ukraine
numbers
into
like
bankruptcy.
that. The
For
€1
Putin,
billion
this
to
loan means
€3
another
billion
year or two of
that the
sending
EU
soldiers
will be
into a
paying
meat
per
grinder that has
year to
already
service
cost Russia
this loan
over
seems pretty small.
1.25 million soldiers.
Russia has no hope
Now,
of the
the
EU
opposite
simply
is
running out
happening.
of money to make
It's
this
Russia
loan
that is clawing
unviable.
to survive.
What all of
This
this amounts
alone
to
changes
is
everything for
EU
Ukraine.
finding a way to
The second
use
turn
the
of the
frozen
screw
Russian
comes from the
assets
fact
to
that
hurt
Ukraine
Putin.
looks set
And that's why it
to
has
not have to
screwed
repay a
Putin.
penny of this
He
loan.
thought that those assets
Repayments
were
will be made
enshrined.
from Russian reparations.
Yes, the proceeds
the EU
generated
has
from
reserved
them
the
had
right
been
to use
used
the
to
Russian
fund
assets
Ukraine
that are
before.
frozen in EU
For
countries to
instance,
repay
the
the loan.
UK had used
Right
£1
now,
billion,
Russia has around
or about
€210 billion frozen
$1.36 billion billion.
banks. One
Of the
way or
proceeds
another,
from the frozen
Russia is
assets it
paying for
holds to
Putin's
fund
war.
weapons and
The
military
financing for the
support
loan
for
will be
Ukraine
raised by the
by
EU
September
borrowing on capital
2025,
markets,
but the
backed by
actual
the EU
assets
budget,
themselves were safe,
which stands
or
at 2
so
trillion
Putin
euros.
thought.
Russia
Now,
has
they
no
aren't.
hope of
The new
EU
loan
running out of
mechanism
money.
means that Russia
Putin
will be
thought those
repaying the
frozen
loan
assets were safe.
one way
Now,
or
they
another,
aren't.
And that
This
will leave
leaves Putin
fuming at a time when Russia's federal budget deficit has climbed to $22.3 billion.
There are
And
strings
oil
attached.
and gas revenues
Ukraine must
continue to
continue
plummet.
advancing democratic
All of
governance,
this sounds
protecting
perfect for
human rights,
Ukraine.
and upholding the rule
However,
of law.
there are strings attached to
Furthermore,
the 90
Ukraine
billion
has to
euros
continue its
loan.
anti-corruption drive
We've covered
following
a
a
couple of
scandal in
those
the
strings
energy sector
already,
in 2025.
namely the condition that
Uncovered
Ukraine
during
can only
Operation
buy
Midas,
weapons from specific
Ukraine
European
seems well
countries.
on its way to meeting these
Unless
conditions.
those countries can't
Before
provide
this
the
loan,
weapons,
Ukraine's budget
in
for
which case
2026
Ukraine can seek
projected
them
a
from
massive
third
gap
countries.
of about $45
Plus,
billion.
the loan mechanism
Ukraine
still
will
has to
spend
pass through the European
27.2%
Council,
of its
though no
GDP on
problems are
defense.
anticipated
This
there.
loan is a
But
financial
there is a
lifeline.
third condition
As
attached
Natalie
to the
Lasso
EU
said,
loan, which is that
support for
Ukraine must
Ukraine
continue
rests on
to
a
do
small number
several
of countries,
things.
and most of it comes
These
from
include
Europe.
advancing
Our
democratic
security is at
governance in the
stake.
country,
Ukraine
protecting
will
human
become
rights,
stronger.
and upholding the
The
rule
60
of law.
billion euros earmarked
Furthermore,
for defense
Ukraine has to
can be
continue its
spent in
anti-corruption
Ukraine,
drive,
pumping money into
which is
drone
a key
manufacturing,
condition attached
aiming
in
for
the
7
wake of a
million drones
corruption
in
scandal that
2026.
rocked
Ukraine
Ukraine's
has
energy
also
sector
formed
in
agreements for
2025.
Rafale and Gripen
Ukraine
jets.
seems well on its
Money
way to
makes a
meeting all of
military
these
stronger.
conditions.
Zelenskyy
The
thanked
scandal
the
itself
European
was
Parliament,
uncovered during
stating
Operation
this is
Midas,
precisely
which
the
was led
signal
by
that must be sent to the aggressor.